Welcome to the InitiativeOne Leadership Podcast, where we help leaders maximize their impact and transform their lives. I'm your host, Nick Nyber, and today we have Dr. Phil Ertl on the show here today. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thanks, Nick. Great to be here.
Great to have you on here. And if you've not heard yet, I've interviewed Phil in the past, but today we're going to talk a little bit more about what's happening in education. And just to give you a little bit of background on Phil, Phil had spent over 30 years in the education industry, over 20 years as a superintendent in a couple different school districts. Is that right?
Correct.
Couple different school districts. And since leaving his superintendency, he's been now at InitiativeOne for a couple years, and now he works directly with schools all over the country, and he's the vice president of our education division right here at InitiativeOne. So great to have you here on the show. Thanks for stopping by.
You bet.
All right. So let's go ahead and get into this. You're working with schools. I know that you work with multiple different kinds of organizations, but because of your background in education, your main focus is really working with schools, working with superintendents, administrators, principals, teachers, all the way down to the students, right?
Correct.
So what have you been seeing this last several months? Like, what are some of the challenges that some of these schools are facing right now?
You know, I think the schools are facing similar challenges that they have all along, but also I think with the time and the environment and everything that's going on, there's some newer challenges that have arisen. But over time, I think there's a lot of those challenges that have been there. There's been political challenges. There's been funding challenges. There's been leadership challenges. Those have always been there. I think the idea of coming out of COVID still has had an impact. People are essentially rewired, and there may not be more impact than anywhere than in school districts. And it takes a different type of leader now to be leading in schools than in the past too, and we're seeing that quite a bit.
Okay. Yes, and COVID is not. I mean, it's in the past, but people are still affected by everything that happened over the last few years. What would you say is something that's maybe different than from, like, think back to when you were a superintendent to a superintendent that's brand new, you know, they're year one this year. What's different than from where you were in that?
I think the expectations have changed. Technology has changed everything, communication, the expectations for communication.
What do you mean by expectations?
Well, even when email became prevalent in school districts and the operations, the concept was you give 24 hours to give a response. Earlier, it was even 48 hours. That has moved down to as soon as people click send, they're waiting for the reply. So the expectations to communicate quickly are there as well. And not just for administrators, but for teachers, the expectations. I think the expectations in the classroom have become unbearable at times for our teachers.
The expectations of the teachers?
The expectations of them, correct, from all different levels, from administration, from parents, from students. They're in a tough spot.
What would you say is, when you're in a role and you're serving in an industry and you spend so much time there, sometimes you don't even realize like what's going on because you've been doing it for so long. What was like something that was eye-opening? Like, you know, even like when you had started here at InitiativeOne, what's something that you saw, but that was already there when you were there, but you didn't see it because now you're looking on the inside before you were on the inside?
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit that I see differently.
Okay.
I don't know like specifically what is different, but I have clarity to see that the challenges of working in schools, I look at those challenges a little bit differently. I think when I was working, the big thing for me was I never took time to self-reflect and really grow, and it was just that constant grind of one issue after the next. Some people will call it putting out fires nonstop. You're dealing with issues and really not focusing on being a leader. And I think that's a problem that I see in education right now. people aren't taking the time, and it's not self-care. It's really about, you can't lead others unless you're in a good place yourself. And to me, that's probably been the most clarity that I've seen since I've been away for a year and a half now, and working with different leaders as well.
So the healthier that you are as a leader, the more that you can give to the organization that you're serving. And that could be a classroom, that can be a handful of principals, could be a whole district. Absolutely.
And my description of healthy leader isn't just physically and even just mentally healthy. It's about your self-belief. You have to have a strong self-belief to be able to be an effective leader. And as you know, at InitiativeOne, that's one of the aspects that we work at quite a bit.
Correct. One of the things that, and this is even just working with some other organizations, is like it's go, go, go all the time. Like you're always it's like you're always grinding. You know, you're always getting after it. But then like 5 years passes by, like, wow, like, how did 5 years pass so fast? And the reason it is because people aren't reflecting. They're not slowing down. They're not like looking at, all right, what's really going on here? Yes, we have challenges. Who doesn't have challenges? What is the root? What is the root of these issues that we're dealing with? And I think that's a little bit of the magic that InitiativeOne has in that leadership process. Is it gives leaders that opportunity to slow down and breathe. And then especially with intact teams, a team of 8 or 15 people, they're able to get around a table and actually talk like, hey, what's going on?
Yeah, speaking of things going by quick, the 3 hour, when we do 3 hours in our meetings, 3 hours are never enough time. It's amazing. And I think we had an opportunity one time. We were in a school district, and the next session was supposed to be done virtually, and they just asked for us to come back in person because they put such great value on that ability, their ability to have that time to just reflect and discuss issues of what really about leadership, not necessarily about school leadership. There's such a difference of that as well.
Okay. Dr. Fred had talked about that this morning with the check-in at the think tank. Every time a session starts, there's always a check-in. How are you doing? And what a great gift to give to these school leaders that are in education, a chance to breathe. And actually, you can't change something if you're not aware of what's going on.
Right. Yeah, and time is always an issue and a challenge, and sometimes it's an excuse to not do things because there's never a good time to start an initiative in schools. There's always something coming up. So time is certainly a resource, but it's interesting when people actually look. Time and money is always a challenge in schools, but I think more often it's an issue of priorities. Are we going to prioritize our leadership and grow, and we're going to take time to actually do that? What I find is the people that we end up working with, they somehow manage to find that time and pull it together and put it as a priority. And what's been really exciting for me is to see the growth. You don't always, when you're in the middle of, like you were talking about, when you're in the middle of the grind, you don't always see growth either until sometimes when you're gone, you can see things that were accomplished. My opportunity to see growth in people now has multiplied dramatically because it's when you go and you don't see people every single day, and you come back and you learn of the pivots that they've made and some of the changes, and you see teams come together and start to gel. It's pretty powerful.
So one of the questions that people ask, and this isn't just in the education division or education industry, it's really across the board of all the different industries that we serve here: manufacturing, retail, healthcare, so many other industries that we serve here at InitiativeOne. And people ask, number one, will it work? And then number two, will it stick? And there are programs. It sounds like you probably had attended some of these trainings over the years as a superintendent. Will it work and will it stick? You went through the leadership transformation process several years ago. what are your thoughts on those two questions? Will it work, and will it stick? What have you experienced?
Well, it works without a doubt, and I think those two questions kind of run together, because I would define working as sticking. But to have a long-term impact, it takes a lot of work. You know, doing this type of work is not for the faint of heart. It's really challenging work. I always tell everybody it's a simple process, but incredibly difficult to carry out, because you're talking to yourself about making significant changes in how you operate as a leader, how you operate as a person. And too often I just think of different events I've gone to over the years for training. And, you know, the reality is you go into it and you come out of it saying, if I can just pull one thing out of it, this is going to be good. I'm going to call it a success. Well, the reality is Initiative One is not just one thing. It's a significant change for people to make. And the only way it's going to last is to have that commitment, the commitment to change, the commitment to follow Trust Accelerators, the commitment to be healthy leaders, and to make sure that the people you bring on are going to be healthy, and that you're going to create a culture, what we call an 8.0 culture, where issues get put on the table, we talk about things, we solve problems, make decisions better than others. And that's all through that collaboration and trust that we build. And like I said, if leaders want this to last, it will last. If they want it to work, it will work. It's not different in that way than anything else. It's if you put the energy and effort into it, you're going to see results, and you're going to see amazing results. And that's what I've been seeing, and it's been exciting.
Okay. And one of the ways that people get introduced to us a lot of the times is through these think tanks that Initiative One puts on every month. Some of the organizations that you're working through first got introduced that way, really to attend the think tanks. Can you talk a little bit about the think tanks and how people can maybe plug into those?
Yeah, so it's one of the topics that we work through with Initiative One that usually Dr. Fred or someone else on our team is going to be presenting and sharing information. I think they're incredibly powerful. When I'm there, I'm like, and I think most people kind of feel like they're talking directly to you because the issues are so relevant. But it's just a taste of how we operate, what we do, and what we're about, and a taste of our leadership transformation process that we encourage people to join us and partner with us for.
So you recently retired from your superintendency, and I imagine there's quite a few other superintendents that are probably exiting the industry, which also means there's a lot of new superintendents that are brand new, maybe not new to the industry, but new to that role. What would you maybe share with them regarding the leadership transformation process? Like, if someone's like retiring next year, how would you guide them in terms of making not necessarily taking an unhealthy culture, make it healthy? Like, how do you advance that culture, make it a healthier culture, remove that drama? What would you share with those school leaders?
So the people leaving, I would tell them, look at this as a retirement gift.
Okay.
The impact, this is how I see the impact. Whether you're working in a school district or not, this impacts your life. And how you operate, how you live, and living on purpose is just a different approach for a lot of different people. And not very many people are able to live their life by purpose. And that's really for that stage in life after retirement, to be able to do that during retirement, that's what you want people to be able to do. For new superintendents, what a powerful way to build a team. We've had the opportunity to step in with some new superintendents, some veteran superintendents, but the impact of, for example, a first-year superintendent working with their new team, and it's a relationship business. Everything we do is about relationships, and to be able to build those relationships and build that trust in an accelerated manner, and start putting a foundation of the culture that you know is going to be best for your students, your staff, and for you, that opportunity has been amazing. So we've seen that happen. It's been powerful.
So you've seen that. You've seen some people that are exiting, and they give that as a gift almost to the team.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still coming from the school. We understand that, but
Right.
like it's the changing of the guard, right? Like I'm leaving, like I want to leave this better than how I left it or I found it.
And maybe the best example is currently we have a retiring superintendent and a newly hired superintendent who will be taking over in July, going through the process together.
Oh, okay.
And I'm in awe of both of them. That's the approach they would take as they transition. There's going to be new ways and new ideas, certainly with the new superintendent, but he's also there's a lot of mutual respect there. So it's a powerful way to transition.
That's really interesting because I'd say that's probably a little bit of the exception to the rule.
Yeah, I would think
because someone retiring, like sometimes, I mean, someone's ready to retire, they want to hang it up and like, all right, I just want to do nothing. And I imagine there's some kind of bond being built right there between that retiring and the new person that's getting into that role. That's setting up that district for success.
Correct.
Absolutely setting them up for success. And, you know, as you talk about the challenges and Dr. Stephen Peters talks about the challenges, I mean, it's tough right now in education, you know, and ultimately you want what's best for the students. And if the leaders are struggling, it's hard for them to give from an empty well.
Right. And you certainly don't want to get yourself into victim mode. And part of victim thinking is that you have no control over anything. The reality is you got to focus on what's in your locus of control. Mm-hmm. I think in education, it's a way to cope by saying we can't do this, we don't have the authority, we don't have the ability. I feel really strong about it being a mindset. Mm-hmm. And things are challenging. Things were challenging back in 2000 when I started as a superintendent. They were challenging in 2011 in Wisconsin when Act 10 went through and turned the place upside down in how we operated as schools. There's always challenging times, and that's really why you're in leadership, is to help people through challenging times. So it's, you know, being a leader, not tough or not easy work. It's tough, it's difficult, it's challenging, and you got to be up for that challenge. And you got to stay healthy to be able to do it.
So going back to what you had shared about self-reflection and being able to like step away and really think about like really what's going on. What would you know? Let's say I'm a superintendent. Like what could I do today that would help with that?
One could be to reach out to InitiativeOne, and we could have a conversation about a lot of ideas that can help with that. But personally, it's really setting aside time to focus on yourself. And educators are givers. Always want to give, and it's a selfish feeling to focus on yourself. Talk to anybody that takes that time, they feel guilty that they're taking time to focus on themselves. But when you go through it and think further about it and know there's a lot of research to support the fact that when you're in a good place, you're a better leader and you're helping others. The impact, that's what we talk about a lot, is what kind of impact do we want to have? And it's all about impact. And the better place you are as a leader, the better your team is as a leader, the more impact you're going to have on students. So
it sounds a lot like creating boundaries in education, in a leadership role, creating those boundaries so you can take care of yourself.
Right, and setting boundaries are tough. I mean, it's not different than any field, though. I mean, you're setting boundaries on when are you going to be available? Are you available 24/7? Is that a healthy approach? Is that a good approach?
Right, you were talking about expectations.
Right.
An email comes through, like, why haven't you emailed me back? Like, what's going on? Like, the expectations are so high that the thought process of taking a break and creating a boundary it's almost like it's not possible.
Yeah, and the whole idea of working harder, hard work, as I grew up and I was taught was hard work was time and energy, effort, but time. You had to put in time.
Right.
And that was the focus, not getting the accomplishments done or getting the work actually done. And I think that's that's a change we look at. Like the whole concept, people talk about working smarter without a doubt, and it's setting boundaries so you're not trying to live two separate lives with family and with work, and it can come together and be together, but you have boundaries. I've always looked at people that had solid boundaries and were, I don't know if envious would be the right word, but just felt really good about the work that they were doing by having boundaries and living by them. It's pretty neat to see.
So you liked seeing people with boundaries, or you resented them?
I respected the heck out of them.
You respected the heck out of them, okay.
Because I knew how hard the work was to maintain that.
To be able to say no.
To live on purpose and know what you're going to say no to and know what you're going to say yes to. And when you say yes to everything, you're really not saying yes to anything.
Correct.
So
it's a daily thing. Being able to, what you said, live on purpose. That is such a powerful question to ask at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of self-talk. I was telling the group yesterday that, like, if somebody could listen into my head and hear me talking to myself, I might be in trouble. Because I do a lot of self-talk now, and I think you have to. You can't take a day off and think you're going to grow as a person, as a leader. It's something you've got to make a commitment to, and once you do that, like any commitment you make, it becomes easier as time goes along. It becomes part of who you are, and it's same thing with the school district. When you commit to changing a culture, it just takes time. You can change climate in a day. Culture is something that's embedded and takes a long time to change, but if you have the persistence, it can happen and create that kind of psychologically safe environment like Dr. Fred was talking about today.
So you practice self-talk.
I do.
Do you practice positive self-talk or negative self-talk?
I try to keep the negativity out of it. Positive intent. I mean, there's.
Is it easy keeping the negative out?
No, it's not easy, but I've trained myself to start focusing on what I have control of, what I don't have control of. The Serenity Prayer has always been hanging in my house, and I've lived by that my whole life. That, you worry about the things you can control, and I've gotten a whole lot better with that too. So what does that do? That lowers anxiety, lowers stress levels, and helps you focus on the target.
And each of us need to remember and remind ourselves that what we do is, this is Dr. Fred's TED Talk. You are enough. Like what you did today, you're enough. Your value is not based on external circumstances.
Right.
You're enough.
Well, we all have moments of imposter syndrome. We all have, like, I can't believe, why am I here? I think we all go through that, but you want to make it a hotel stay, not a residence, right? So you want to go and it's okay. We know that's going to happen.
Yes.
But don't stay there permanently. You got to have that self-belief. We talk about that 8.0 culture where there's self-belief. I mean, think about it in a school district of how that plays out all the way down to students when you have central office administrators, principals, mainly teachers, and then what impact that has on what our business is. It's working with students, and that impact can be incredible.
So would you say there's a lot of teachers and administrators practicing positive self-talk today?
I would say the ones that we've been associated with for a while are doing it more than others. I think they understand and see the benefits. It's human nature. You get a positive response out of something you're doing, you continue to do it.
Correct.
Right, if it's healthy. And the self-talk and self-reflection, for me, I get a positive response out of it. It helps me, keeps me in a better place, and really focusing on what we can accomplish versus what we can't accomplish. Again, mindset. This is all mindset. How do you operate? How do you want your mindset to be the best person, to be the best version of you?
Mindset. That's not easy to work on.
No, it's a challenge.
It's important to work on, and unless you're being intentional on it, we tend to probably fall to our default, which is reacting versus responding because of our mindset. But I agree with you on the mindset is you really need to be mindful of what you're telling yourself. I think of this this saying, be kind to yourself. A lot of people aren't very kind to themselves.
No, they're not. And it's important. Like you said, I couldn't agree more. It comes back to that taking care of yourself. The oxygen mask in the airplane, right? Mm-hmm. You put it on yourself first so you can be good enough to help other people.
Yes.
That's just true of leadership in general. And, none of us had leadership training. None of us were really prepared to be leaders. We might have had training on curriculum or different discipline models and things like that. And in our master's program, even doctoral programs don't focus necessarily on true leadership and the components. Like the work we do with InitiativeOne is just so different than anything I had been exposed to before.
Right.
And when something's that different, you can get that much more growth out of it.
Right. Well, thank you, Phil, for sharing all this information with us. One last question. If I'm a superintendent or a principal or administrator of a school, what are some things that would almost be things that I could look for in my district that would be assigned to say, hey, maybe we need to give InitiativeOne a call? What are some of those things that you've seen that we've been able to impact some of these other school districts?
I think it's pretty clear when you don't see trust, and there's meetings after the meeting where you might have your staff meeting and you have your agenda, but the real agenda is under the table, and that gets taken care of out in the parking lot afterward with people talking and saying, deciding what things are really going to happen. Lack of trust shows up in a lot of different ways. Decisions can't get made. People aren't going to speak up. Mm-hmm. There's a culture of intimidation. People feel like there's going to be retaliation, and they're really just not confronting issues. They're not putting issues on the table because they've done it before, and all these other reasons why it's not going to happen, and they're not going to do it again. Instead of creating that psychologically safe environment where people feel confident and comfortable putting issues on the table. So there's a lot of warning signs, but the interesting thing is, all those warning signs, I think people that have the most warning signs don't seem to be interested in growth. A lot of times they're the ones that believe they've already arrived, and that things are just fine. The people we end up working with are the ones that really don't need us, but they continue to want to get better and grow. They have that growth way of thinking, and they want to keep improving. So, been really, part of it the last 2 years, been able to really work with some world-class people.
And give that gift of time to some of these leaders, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So the big thing, what I'm hearing you say is, if there's a lack of trust, and if some employees feel like it's just not a safe environment, psychologically safe, where people can come to either the leader or their other coworkers, that might be something like, hey, you know what, maybe InitiativeOne could help, right? So thank you for sharing that. I think that's really helpful for people listening to this show right now, because what we do is deep, impactful work here at InitiativeOne, and sometimes that's hard to explain because it is hard work. It's not just some kind of like half-day keynote. Like, that's not really what we do. It's really doing a deep dive into you as a leader. How can you show up? How can I show up as my best self? And then by doing that, then I can show up as the best leader for my team. Right. And that takes work. It's hard. It's hard work, but it's meaningful, and it's a deep impact. And who wins at the end of the day? The students.
Right.
The students win because of this.
And don't ever lose sight of that piece. And I think for people that see challenges or want to get better, want to grow, I look at it in 3 different ways to approach it with InitiativeOne. One is to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to have a conversation. Second one is come to a think tank. It's a good way to get a taste of the work we do and see how we operate. But I think probably the best way, and I've told everybody that I talk to about InitiativeOne, I said, you want some names? I'll give you all the names of anybody that's gone through the process. Talk to, I could talk for hours on end about InitiativeOne, but talk to the people that have gone through it recently, and they'll give you the truth.
Awesome.
About whether it works or not. If you're an educator or working in a school, feel free to leave a comment with a question. We'll be happy to respond and help you in any way that we can. We know there's challenges out there. Feel free to put those down. We'll get back to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing today. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your thoughts and the different ways that you're bringing hope to these educators. It's such important work, and there's a lot of work to be done, right?
Thank you.
A lot of work to be done. So thank you for being on the show. And just as we close here, Phil had talked a little bit about the leadership event that we do each month, the think tanks. Go to just go to initiativeone.com/events and go ahead and register for the next event. And you can attend either in person or online. There's no cost to attend, and that's a great way to introduce ourselves to you. And if you've been following us and you've been attending, keep doing that. We appreciate you being part of our leadership community. And if you found value in this episode, leave a comment below. Join us in the conversation if you're watching this. But if you found value, go ahead and share this with a family member, a friend, a colleague. If you haven't followed our podcast at all, go ahead and subscribe to our show on whatever platform that you listen to, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're on all of them. And then finally, our goal as an organization is to impact more people that we're impacting than we are today. And the best way that we can impact more people is if you love this episode, leave us a rating, leave us a review if you can, and that's going to help us impact more and more people. So if you found value, share this with someone else, and we appreciate you listening. We appreciate you watching. And remember, leadership isn't what you do, it's who you are. Thanks for listening.